Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Hey friends, Merry Christmas season. Can't say it enough because we have to make up for all the happy holidays that we hear all through Christmas season. But thanks for sharing the podcast and for watching. I want to shout out really quick to some friends. Forgive me if I didn't mention your state and you have been a contributor here. If you sent in a donation, please let me know because I want to make sure. We've got people from Nebraska, South Dakota, California, Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Carolina, Virginia, Iowa, New York, New Mexico, and I think that's it in recent donations. So thank you guys. We're growing. It's because you are sharing the podcast and you're praying for us, of course. So you can subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and that is at worldviewmatters.tv. You'll get one email a week in your inbox, and that's a recap of the weekly podcasts. And then, of course, you can download the Freedom Project app and take us with you on your iPhone if you'd like. So today I'm blessed to do another show with my friend Scott Schara. He's a nationally recognized expert commentator on the medical murder agenda in America and the dangers of incentivized healthcare. Scott's research proves that this practice of medical murder is intentional and by design. He's the father, of course, of Grace Schara, a 19-year-old with Down syndrome who was killed by St. Elizabeth's Hospital, Ascension Health, and there's a lawsuit pending that's going on right now. We're going to talk about that a little bit and get an update from Scott. There's Grace right there. So he's on a mission to proclaim the truth and to spotlight the crimes of the American medical system. He shared his insights, research, and personal story through hundreds of TV, radio, podcast appearances, and of course, documentaries. He's got a show called Deprogramming with Grace's dad. That can be found on Rumble, by the way, and on all major podcast platforms. And he's got a landmark lawsuit. We're going to talk about Scott Schara v. Ascension Health et al., and that's underway in Wisconsin Circuit Court. So Scott, brother, welcome to Worldview Matters again.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's amazing to be here because it was 2 years ago that I met you for the first time, and you believed me. And I remember I came in with that stack of papers with my original research, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, you really did a whole bunch of research here." Well, now it's become way bigger.
And at that time, you had just begun to dig.
It was just I had no idea what we were getting into. But
well, a lot to talk about today. We'll get to your lawsuit update in a minute. We're also going to talk about the depopulation agenda and your medical murder series. But we've got to talk about my new book, Assault on the Image of God. Why am I mentioning my book when I've got Scott Schara in studio? It's because he and his wife, Cindy, contributed a chapter to the book right before chapter 10, which is Do No Harm and Do Not Lie. Scott Schara and Cindy Schara wrote a chapter called The Complicit, Corrupt Medical Industry, Grace's Story. Just hearing that, Scott, do you have something in your eye, or are you feeling a little touched?
This is tough. This is tough stuff.
So tell us, just how you're feeling right now. My goodness, it's been 2 years or more in this battle, and you've got a chapter in my book, and I'm thankful for it. I believe it's very powerful. I hope people read it, but just share your thoughts right now.
Well, big picture, I have never worked so hard in my life. I've never done something so important. I can't believe God picked us to do this. And, it's still emotional.
Yeah.
Grace was our best buddy.
Yeah.
And we just got done with the Wisconsin deer hunting season, and she was my hunting buddy. And so I didn't have my hunting buddy this year.
Wow.
So it's tough. So it's still tough. I mean, it's been 2 years, but it's like yesterday regarding the emotional piece. The fight that we're in, I've never been more committed to something in my life.
Yeah.
I've started 3 businesses from scratch, and this is more work than that. And it's phenomenal to be part of something that is saving lives, and that was our goal from the beginning.
That's huge. I obviously hear in your comments you're trusting in God's sovereignty. You would have never chose to go down this road, losing your 19-year-old daughter. But he has you here for such a time as this, and to save lives, Scott, we didn't plan on talking about this, but I signed your book, and Cindy's book. And in yours, I wrote a little note about Christmas because I know Grace loved Christmas. And it must be very, very hard having a few Christmases now without Grace. Do you want to comment on that? Because there are a lot of people are viewing here who have lost maybe a parent or a loved one through this last year. And just share whatever's on your heart.
Well, you have to walk through things. When Travis died, my best friend said, Scott, you're going to have to walk through this. And so I have already walked through losing my only son. And so when Grace died, I had practice. I mean, you don't want to have practice in something like that,
No.
but that's what it takes. Every day you put one step forward and you keep walking. But all these things like deer season, Christmas, all the holidays, you walk through those. Those are the hardest ones to walk through. The birthdays, the anniversaries, all those things. That's what everybody is called to do. We've got to walk through it.
Yeah. It's a perspective check for all of us. And I think of the verse, one of my favorite verses, Psalm 90, verse 12. Good reminder, teach us to number our days that we might gain a heart of wisdom. Our lives are but a vapor. Thank God we have the hope of Christ and eternity. Right. And life with a great family reunion and life with Jesus forever. And that's the message of Christmas, the hope. By the way, before we get into the other topics I wanted to bring Scott in here for, I have a quote from Pastor John MacArthur. He said, if we could condense all the truths of Christmas into only 3 words, these would be the words: God with us. Wow. And I thought, wow, his presence because of the Holy Spirit, but the Word became flesh, dwelt among us, and Jesus is with us, God with us. That's just an amazing thought that is true. It's an amazing factual truth. So, Scott, Schara, let's get an update on your lawsuit now. Last time, you weren't at this stage now, the last time you were on Worldview Matters. So give us an update. We can just walk through some of the notes here that you sent.
So it's huge what's happened since I was here last time. We had a hearing on October 30th. Just to give the brief background, we filed the lawsuit on April 11th. The first hearing was on July 14th. At that hearing, the judge set the 3-week jury trial, which begins the day before the presidential election. So November 4th of 24 is the first day that's jury selection.
Wow.
Well, at the July 14th hearing, he wanted us to file an amended complaint to separate out the battery claim. And the reason why is we found out that this medical industrial complex has done a fantastic job of protecting doctors. They've shielded them through state statutes. Yeah. So you really can't sue a doctor for anything other than medical malpractice, and there's a liability limitation per state statute. And we thought that the idea that we didn't receive informed consent relative to Grace's treatment, that we pulled that out as a separate claim. The defense shared that in Wisconsin, and this is going to be in all states because this is how they've done it, is the fact that you don't have informed consent, while it is a battery, is a medical malpractice claim. So we filed an amended complaint, pulled out the battery claim as a common law battery claim. Well, that sent a firestorm to the defense, and they filed 2 motions to dismiss, and the judge heard those motions on October 30th, and he didn't allow either of the motions to proceed and allowed our entire case to go to trial on November 4th. And what I want to quote from, David, is from our legal team's brief in opposition. So when somebody files a motion to dismiss, your responsibility is you file a brief in opposition with the court in response to their motion. So we did that, and I want to quote 3 things out of that brief in opposition because it lays out the significance of this case. This is the first case of its kind.
Yep.
It is a trailblazing case. If we win this medical battery claim, we have 5 claims, but the medical battery is the most important. If we win that claim, it changes the entire landscape for the entire country. Our goal with filing this lawsuit was to stop the behavior, and this claim would stop the behavior. Why? Because there would be no limitation on damages anymore. And so that means attorneys would be willing to take on these cases. That's why there's no cases filed. Attorneys don't want to take them on because there's no money in the cases. Yep. So this makes it so that there's an unlimited damage award number one, and it increases the statute of limitations where people can file. Typical statute of limitations, like in Wisconsin, is 3 years. A battery claim doubles the statute of limitations, which is fantastic. So I want to, if you have another question, that's great. Otherwise, I want to cover the
just
three
go
things.
ahead and quote from the case itself, and let's just inform people on where it's at.
All right. So the case, you mentioned that we filed against Ascension Hospital System, which is true, and then you said et al. Well, et al. Is 5 doctors and 2 nurses who were directly involved with Grace's case. That's a very expensive way to file because you have now multiple defense attorneys and multiple depositions, multiple experts. But we did it that way because a doctor and nurse cannot use an excuse of following protocols to implement and kill people. That's not allowed. If you just file against the hospital system, that does not accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. Right. So we filed against David Beck, Daniel Leonard, Carl Baum, Ramada Murata, Gavin Shokar, Holly McGinnis, and Allison Barkholz. Those are the 5 doctors, 2 nurses who were directly involved. All right, so what we did first is the legal team laid out what the rule of law is. And this is critical in a case because a judge likes to rule from the bench. They can be bought off. They can have a gun to their head. But they laid out what the rule of law is. So they wrote, in analyzing the motions, the court should accept all allegations in plaintiff's amended complaint as true. The complaint is only insufficient if it appears to be a certainty that no relief can be granted under any set of facts which plaintiff could prove. So when you lay out what the rule of law is, the judge had to, if he's going to follow the rule of law, he had to accept this brief in opposition. This does not mean the judge is on our side.
Right.
It simply means he's willing to let the truth be uncovered through a jury trial.
He's allowing it to go forward.
That's
basically.
correct. So that was fantastic that they did that.
Yep.
Here's the significant paragraph. And we put this entire brief in opposition on Grace's website so that other attorneys and other plaintiffs can use the language.
Okay.
And
that's good to know.
It's important because this language should be used in every case right now.
Thank you. Now, is that GraceSchara.com or OurAmazingGrace.net?
It's on OurAmazingGrace.net.
Okay.
All right. So what they did was, remember I said that lack of informed consent while a battery has been put underneath medical malpractice when you file a claim. Yeah. So we had to separate out lack of informed consent from a common law battery. And they did it with this paragraph. Quote, imagine a physician who fails to fully inform a patient about the risks of a leg amputation, but the patient does agree to have his leg amputated. This violates the duty to obtain informed consent under state statute. So this is where the doctor would not be telling the whole truth. All right.
Okay.
You go in, you're getting your leg amputated. He says, oh yeah, this is common, and really just kind of being a salesperson, but doesn't tell you every single thing that is a possibility. So that violates state statute. There's an informed consent state statute. Now imagine a physician who amputates a patient's leg without obtaining consent or even telling the patient or the patient's family what he is doing. And in this case, removing the patient's power of attorney and parent from the hospital first. That's me. That is a battery.
That's basically what happened to you.
That is what happened, right? So they're saying if you don't get any information, and this is pretty typical of a hospital setting. Remember, in a hospital setting, if they had a statute of Satan outside the building, you would have a warning going in. But you go in because you're programmed to trust the white coat. We're believing that this is a safe zone. They're following the Hippocratic Oath. It's all lies. So when you go in, if you're not prepared, what they're doing, you trust. So then they just do things, and sometimes they tell you what they did after the fact. Most of the time, they don't even communicate with you. So that's a battery.
All right, brother, we're going to take a very, very quick break and thank one of our sponsors, Harbingers Daily. We'll be right back with Scott Schara on Worldview Matters.
Today's show is brought to you by Harbingers Daily, world news biblically understood. Stay informed at harbingersdaily.com.
Hey friends, I want to invite you to tune in live Thursday, December 14. We're going to be doing a live Q&A on Worldview Matters. So Thursday the 14th at 1 p.m. Central Time, 1 p.m. As many of you that can tune in and join us, just if you have any questions, comments, guests that you would like to suggest for the program, we'll talk about some of the guests we've had, some of the topics. It'll just be really free-flowing and kind of talk about Christmas as well. So again, Thursday the 14th, 1 p.m., we are doing a live Worldview Matters. Oh, sorry. Hey, by the way, if you want to get one of these mugs, we are sending them out as a thank you to those who are helping us with our fundraising campaign. Between now and Christmas, we are raising operating costs for Worldview Matters in the early months of 2024. So guys, if you want to contribute $25 a month, you'll get one of these mugs, or any donation of $200 or more. And we thank you guys, the ones that have already contributed, and those who are able to afford that. We know that's a lot of money, but it does cost a lot of money to do this podcast like this. So thanks a lot for that. On one side, Worldview Matters. On the other side, keep speaking the truth about things that matter. Scott Schara, you were going to share one more paragraph from the lawsuit, and you have that on your computer there. Would you please continue?
Yes, so I went through the introduction, which is sharing what the rule of law is, then separating out a battery claim, so they defined what a battery is, and then we went on the offensive, and this is fantastic. So, quote, defendants want this court to rule that a patient with Down syndrome can be intentionally restrained, intentionally deprived of advocacy, and intentionally administered deadly sedatives, all without consent, and these actions are simple medical negligence. So, assuming battery under the medical negligence statute in such a way would make hospitals walled gardens where any intentional misconduct would be treated as simple negligence. Indeed, defendants envision a world where there is no common law claim for the failure of a healthcare provider to obtain consent that falls outside of medical malpractice. In this world, an unethical or financially motivated physician may administer deadly drugs without consent for malign purposes, including making room for new patients. The physician's liability would be limited under the medical malpractice statute, and even that liability is subject to insurance coverage. So we went on the offensive there, which I really like. And
what Scott described there, those things actually happened to those. You were taken out of the room, that you were Grace's advocate, and they administered the drugs, the lorazepam, the morphine, and Precedex. 3 things. My goodness. So let's talk now. Actually, before we get to the depopulation, let's talk about your medical murder series. We don't have time to get into the whole thing, but it's available on your website, correct? OurAmazingGrace.net?
Yes.
So there are 7 parts to it. My goodness, the research that you've done. So give us a quick overview of the medical murder series.
So I have about 2,500 hours of research at this point. And when I saw it all and realized in end of August, I thought, I've got to put this in a series and organize it so that it's online for all time. And so I approach it like a research project. So the 7 parts are who, what, where, why, when, and how, just like you would research if this is true. So it's titled Medical Murder is the #1 cause of death in the United States by design. So those 6 parts prove that that premise is accurate. And then part 7 is now what? Assuming you agree with this, what are we going to do about it?
And that's what we continue to talk about. What are we going to do about how do we respond? Let's talk about what you sent over from 1967. What are we looking at here? I think we've got it up on the screen there. The plan to depopulate the U.S. What is this, Scott?
Well, in the research, I went all the way back to the beginning of the 1900s, and that's when the eugenics campaign in modern history started with the United States sterilizing people. Well, then, it got over to Germany, and then, of course, what we did, which we always do, is we renounced Hitler because the naughty Hitler is doing eugenics. Well, then we sneak back through Operation Paperclip the top 1,600 eugenicists in the entire world. And what we saw with COVID, of course, the thing is on steroids now. Well, this didn't, COVID, all COVID did was expose the truth. So I went back and started looking at, well, what was really going on? How long have they been programming us? And I remember I went to kindergarten in 68. And in 68, they told us in a weekly reader that it's irresponsible to have more than 2 children. And if you had an electric can opener, if your parents had an electric can opener, that's also irresponsible because they have limited resources. So they're already planting the seed with 5-year-olds for population control. And and climate control. Well, I found this document then, and if you look at it, you think, my gosh, this is shocking. This was put together by the Rockefellers. You can see it says encourage increased homosexuality, fertility control agents in the water supply, encourage chronic depression. All these things are designed to limit our population. So this was already back in 1967. This is the first public document that I found.
And then, of course, from homosexuality, we've got the transgender movement now, which is also part of the limiting the population. And we must mention Margaret Sanger. Of course. She was one who actually inspired Hitler and Germany through Ernst Rudin was one of her top eugenicists with Hitler. He wrote for Margaret Sanger's Birth Control Review in the early 1920s. So there was a connection there. But yeah, you're right. We look down our noses at Germany and Hitler and what happened over there. Well, the abortion, birth control movement just took off here in America.
Correct.
And it's still to this day.
Right.
So yeah, and then we've got euthanasia, which we don't hear a lot about, but 6 states. I just had J.B. Hickson on the podcast a week or two ago in Colorado. It's one of the states where you can legally doctor-assisted suicide. Up in Canada, it's called MAID, M-A-I-D, Medical Assistance in Dying. And so now we've got all these other movements, abortion, euthanasia, we've got homosexuality, transgenderism, and we have read reports. Now, I got banned from YouTube for saying this before, so I'm going to put it in a different way, that the COVID vaccines, some say, have attributed to women's infertility. There's research on that if you want to look it up. I didn't just make that up. That is an actual fact. If you want to look at some of the surveys on increased infertility in women, this is all, as you say, by design. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's more than just by design. So they have programmed us. So the banality of evil, so you mentioned abortion, the banality of evil has infiltrated us. So banality means common. So we think that we're doing good by aborting a Down syndrome person before they're born. Why? Because they've convinced us that a disabled person is a burden on society. So that's the banality of evil. So 90% of Down syndrome babies are murdered in the womb today in the United States. So that's an exact example of how they've accomplished the goal through programming. A very specific example, when you talk about the Canadian MAID program, I've talked about this before, Obamacare Section 1553, which is that legalized the euthanasia, mercy killing, and assisted suicide agenda in the United States on March 23rd of 2010. And Ezekiel Emanuel, who's the chief architect, his stated purpose was that anybody who is a non-contributing member of society doesn't deserve medical care. So, and this is
in America.
In America, right?
So we've got, we're running out of time already, Scott. There are 2 things I really want to get to quickly. One of them was the Anthem page, Paid to Kill, and the other one was the My Chart about proxy access for adult to teen accounts. What one do you want to tackle first?
So the Paid to Kill, the interesting thing about this is the timing. It's not surprising that they incentivize the bioweapon just because of the push. But if you look at the numbers, what I'm sharing in that slide is that in the fourth quarter of 2021, if a physician could convince 75% of his patients to get the jab, he would receive a $296,000 bonus. And the timing is interesting because at this point, this fourth quarter of 2021, that's when the hospital murders were at the high point. But Brooke Jackson's lawsuit had already exposed that this was not a vaccine. And the government had already acknowledged that myocarditis was going through the roof in May of 21. So now there's an all hands on board push to get the jab. Wow. The other document is actually even more shocking. So this is from Ascension Health. And so Ascension Health is the system that Grace was murdered in. And you look at that document and you see it would shock anybody that saw it. It says specifically that once a child turns 12, he has unilateral rights to his chart, and the parents have no rights unless the child gives the parent proxy access. And if the child does give the parent proxy access, that access is limited. You can see on the bottom right, it says adult to teen proxy access does not provide for the following: social history information such as sexual activity, substance abuse, etc., ability for the proxy to schedule, cancel, and confirm appointments or past appointments, and inability for the proxy to view sensitive lab and radiology reports. So even if the child gives the parent proxy access, the parent has limited rights.
Wow. This is some of this is not surprising, but how much of this do we not know that it has flown under the radar for all these years?
Well,
you're just finding this out.
I'm just a dad. My degree is DAD. So, I found this out. But you start researching. The problem, David, is I've been on about 800 shows so far, but you're preaching to the choir. What's going on is the propaganda machine that they put in place does not allow this to get out to the masses so they know what is happening. It is so hurtful. My best buddy is gone. I'm all in on this fight, but we can't get on the mainstream media and talk about this.
Yep, and that's propaganda. That's the definition of communist policy, when they censor one side or do not allow all the information out, and they put out their talking points, they put out their narrative. It's propaganda, but it's also communist policy. Other countries with dictators and communism do this, but we've been seeing this in America. I think we share that concern that our country has changed, and even BC before COVID, but since 2020, our country has radically changed. So, Scott, there's so much more we could discuss, but we just have to make sure that people are paying attention. This isn't an easy topic to talk about, but I want to thank you for contributing a chapter to my new book, you and Cindy. And friends, I really encourage you, chapter 9 in the book, I think you're really going to be blessed by it. If you're not familiar with Grace's story, my goodness, you can get the ebook on Amazon. It's called, again, The Complicit Corrupt Medical Industry, and that's by Grace's dad and mom, Scott and Cindy Schara. And so Cindy writes the first section, and then Scott dives into all the research and all the numbers and all the really a lot of hard work. But brother, I'm thankful we're in this fight together. And thankful to have you on and to see you here. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you again soon.
I have goosebumps when you talk about the chapter, so thanks for letting us do that.
Oh, what a blessing. All right, guys. Again, thanks for supporting the show. We'll do it again tomorrow. Let's see, who do we have on tomorrow? Pete Garcia, Carl Kirby, great guests this week and next week. A couple surprise guests and a live show coming up. There's my teaser for a live Worldview Matters coming up in about a week or so. But anyway, thanks for watching and for sharing. God bless you. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.